I thank the Chairman. Let me also thank Chair, actually this entire committee, but particularly Mr. Lundgren for his hard work on this bill. He and I both served on the Speaker's task force for cybersecurity. While this may not be perfect, I think it's a very good step forward, and I look forward to moving this bill to the House floor. This amendment is similar to the filed amendment, although I have directed the staff to make small technical change. The first paragraph should reference subparagraph B rather than A, and I've added the term for cybersecurity purposes to the first paragraph, as that is what this language is for, and I believe it should be made clear in the language that this is using cybersecurity technology for cybersecurity purposes. Finally, I've added a definition for the term countermeasures to be sure there's no confusion as to what is authorized by this language. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to offer this amendment. As you know, it is critical that any cybersecurity legislation include explicit authority for the deployment of consolidated intrusion, detection, prevention, and other similar capabilities to protect Federal civilian agencies. It is also crucial to add legal clarity around the ability of the Federal Government to deploy such capabilities. This very targeted amendment allows the government to make the most efficient use possible of cybersecurity technology. In accordance with the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative begun under the Bush administration and continued today, DHS has been working to deploy the Einstein intrusion detection and prevention capabilities. The Einstein system supplements agencies' own defense capabilities by detecting and blocking malicious actors from accessing Federal agency systems. The system's capabilities are a key part of the Federal Government's strategy to protect Federal agencies from a range of cybersecurity threats, including sophisticated enemies. Unfortunately, deploying Einstein 2 to agencies has frequently been slowed due to the need for lengthy and cumbersome legal reviews and interagency agreements. There are still agencies that have not fully deployed the system due only to the uncertainty in the current law. Agencies very much want to add these protective capabilities to secure their otherwise vulnerable systems, but unfortunately are stymied by uncertainty and bureaucratic negotiation. As DHS prepares to begin deployment of the next generation of protective capabilities known as Einstein 3, it is critical legal uncertainty not delay delivery of advanced capability to agencies. My amendment resolves the issues by clarifying the Secretary's authority to obtain, use, and disclose agency communications and other system traffic for the limited purpose of protecting agency systems. This legislation also contains strong privacy and civil liberties provisions to protect the rights of Federal employees and other users of Federal systems. Particular protections include the creation of Attorney General approved policies and procedures to govern DHS activities, very specific and restricted requirements regarding the collection, retention, use, and disclosure of information obtained by DHS, and a certification requirement by DHS. It's important to note that this amendment and this legislation was drafted in close coordination with the Department of Justice and DHS, and will allow Federal agencies to more easily gain the cybersecurity protection they need from malicious actors. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. Is there any further discussion of the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the McCaul amendment at the desk, and I'm offering that amendment at this time.
Clerk will read the amendment to the amendment.
Amendment to McCaul 001, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee.
Without objection,
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order against the amendment. And could we have a written copy of the amendment?
the gentleman reserves a point of order. Gentleman from Texas.
My good friend from Texas and I have had long discussions. I know of his work, and I certainly appreciate it. I ask unanimous consent that the reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Without objection.
The issue is for us to see this as both securing America, but as well reinforcing the importance of homeland security and the issue of cybersecurity. I think Mr. Lundgren said that. I know the ranking member has said that over and over again, and the administration agrees. And Chairman King, I think by this markup today, you agree of our importance in this issue. So my good friend has offered an amendment that would vest great new authority in the Department of Homeland Security to acquire, intercept, retain, use, and disclose communications and records that are transiting to or from or stored on Federal systems. That is a reaffirmation of the importance of why we even created the Homeland Security Department. But we have also noted that a large percentage of the cybersecurity system is in the private sector, but that the Federal system should also have a shored-up process of protection and the ability to ensure the integrity of a cybersecurity system. While it makes sense that DHS have authority to be aware of cyber threats, it is important that there are safeguards in place to make sure that the privacy rights of Federal employees or Americans who use Federal websites are not violated. We have often heard, though it has not been in the context of terrorism, the enormous faulting of privacy issues dealing with veterans at the Veterans Administration. While the McCaul language does seem to track somewhat with language proposed by the administration in May 2011, it leaves out two very important limitations on this broad grant of new authority that are critical to protecting privacy. First, it leaves out the specific requirement that DHS must certify that any monitoring be only of Federal systems. This is critical because the legal underpinning of this whole warrantless wiretapping program is that it is limited to government networks, and those who use the networks have consented to the monitoring. Second, it does not require specific guidelines to be written to minimize the collection of sensitive and personal information not impacting the national security of this nation, nor require that information be deleted if upon review it is found to have no relevance to the cybersecurity purpose. My colleagues, I'd only argue that this is a bipartisan amendment in terms of the underpinnings that does not limit Mr. McCaul's intent. In fact, I believe that it enhances our work and our authority as both the Homeland Security Department and the Oversight Committee. Believe me, I am a champion of the responsibilities or the authority of this committee in terms of national security. These missing components make the McCaul Amendment substantially different from the previously agreed language and jeopardizes privacy. If Mr. McCall's amendment is enacted without my second-degree amendment, it would mean that in addition to monitoring the communications of all Federal employees, DHS would be able to monitor communications from average Americans, non-threatening Americans when they visit government websites or communicating with the government. Maybe we're talking about those who are engaging in inquiries dealing with Health and Human Services, private issues dealing with Medicare and Medicaid, or other issues that they are seeking information about, Social Security. I believe that DHS hand must be strengthened to help protect Federal networks, and that new authorities must be granted to the Department to do just that. But coupled with any new authority, there must be safeguards for the people that spend long stretches of their days working and playing on the Internet. I urge a yes vote on my second-degree amendment. Mr. McCaul, of course, has long years as a U.S. Attorney. I served as an investigatory attorney on the investigation of the assassinations of Martin Luther King and President John F. Kennedy. No, I was not on the Warren Committee, but the subsequent congressional committee that was in place. It was at that time we were dealing with FBI taps. We had no concept of this. But I can assure you, having experienced such processes as COINTELPRO and seeing what we can do, I know that there is a balance of securing information on behalf of the government, and I know there's a limit to protect America's privacy. You go back into the history books of COINTELPRO, you would understand the basis of this amendment, as well as going forward to ensure minimal privacy, but also the integrity of the DHS and Mr. McCall's amendment. I ask for bipartisan support on the Jackson Lee secondary amendment to Mr. McCall's amendment. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, In my 5 minutes, I would like to ask the gentleman from Texas, first of all, whether or not this language was the product of his work with the Justice Department and Department of Homeland Security of this administration.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and I appreciate the gentlelady's comments, but having said that, this applies to federal government networks only, does not apply to the private sector for cybersecurity purposes only. Has nothing to do with wiretaps. I'm not sure where that's all coming in. And in fact, this amendment was crafted in close coordination with this administration, with the Department of Justice, with the Department of Homeland Security. I find it odd that I'm supporting an amendment that was crafted in close coordination with this administration, yet we're finding objection to it on the other side of the aisle. With that, I yield back to the gentleman.
And my understanding is this allows agencies to implement the Einstein program, which already exists in a number of government agencies, the purpose of which is to detect illegal intrusions into government computer networks. In other words, if someone is attempting to make an intrusion and capture the program or put malware on or somehow go, Einstein is supposed to detect that. Is that correct?
That is correct, and this amendment simply gives legal authorization to the Einstein program.
And the Einstein program exists in a number of different agencies. I think we've had hearings in which we've asked why the Einstein program has not been implemented in some of the government agencies, have we not?
We have, and again, this will advance that effort.
In fact, as I recall, we've even criticized the fact that there's been a slow implementation, and one of the answers that's come back to us is that it takes legal negotiations between the, I guess, DHS, because they're the operator of the program, and the government agencies, and that has slowed it up. And it's my understanding that's what your amendment attempts to try and deal with. Is that right?
Precisely. The bureaucratic negotiations have slowed down the process. This gives legal authority. It will move it forward to harden federal networks from intrusions which happen every day against the federal government.
So this has nothing to do with any offensive program by the federal government to go out and go into private networks for information. It rather is a protection about intrusion into already existing government networks, not private networks.
The gentleman is correct.
Okay. I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the Jackson Lee Amendment. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized. Thank
Yes, I think one of the things we are concerned about is, while we agree about the federal system, but we don't have within this amendment the written authorities that DHS should do it and what they need to come with. I think just giving them the blanket authority without the direction, I think some of us are concerned about. We agree with the federal system, but it leaves out the specific requirement that they must certify their monitoring. So in other words, this reach that government is doing, I think you need to certify whatever they're going to do.
Will the gentleman yield on that point?
Yes.
Because this amendment, as I point in my statement, does have a certification requirement by the Department of Homeland Security. And again, this was drafted in a way to give DHS flexibility, and it was drafted in close coordination with this administration, both the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security. There is a certification requirement in this legislation. And I yield back.
Oh, well, thank you. I think there's some question about it as we read it. We're not able to get that, but I appreciate the gentleman's clarifying that issue. There's another point that it does not require specific guidelines be written to minimize the collection of sensitive and personal information, nor require that the information be deleted upon review. So some of this information that's collected, we don't have any direction as to what they do with it should they not agree that it's usable. And I think if you could help us craft something that we could assure that, we'd be all right.
I think this gives, again, greater flexibility to the department.
I yield.
And I apologize. Will the gentleman yield? This does not apply to the private sector. It only applies to federal government networks for cybersecurity purposes only. And we've made that point. I'd be happy to work with the ranking member at a later date, but I do intend to offer this amendment.
I yield back.
Ranking member yields back. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Gentlelady from New York.
Yes, I'd like to yield some time to Mr. Jackson Lee, the author of this secondary amendment.
I thank the gentlelady from New York, ranking member of the Cybersecurity Committee. And let me just clarify, and Ms. McCaul, I look forward to what may ultimately be a continuing discussion, but let me be very clear. Mr. Lundgren was making a series of inquiries that this is a amendment, or Mr. McCall's amendment is dealing with the Federal system, which I'm very clear of, and recognize that it's not dealing with the private system. And my amendment is very clear. It says the encounters of Americans with the Federal system, inquiring, seeking information. Any of us who have constituency services recognize that we are seeking information, private information. Everyone knows that they have constituents, I do in my office, sign privacy forms, allows us to seek information from their veterans files, their Social Security files, their Medicare files. So the question that we are suggesting here is the privacy necessary to protect those that are using the Federal system. We're not talking about having this apply to the private sector. Secondarily, I respect the fact that Mr. McCall worked with the Department of Justice and Homeland Security. It is the responsibility of this committee to mark up a bill, and the language does not tie to the original administration language on privacy. And there are only two specific points, which is to ensure the protection against getting information that is not relevant to what you have sought to gather. And I think it is a complementary amendment to Mr. McCall's amendment. If the angst is that we have just received this language, then we have also just received, as Mr. Lundgren has indicated, a totally new bill. That is not the bill that was passed by the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity. But as Mr. Lundgren has offered to say, we're doing our job here. And I believe the job is to secure this nation, to secure the system of the Federal Government, but it is also to respect the millions of Americans who use this system and not to line up material that is not. My final point is, Mr. McCall, in citing COINTELPRO, no, I was not suggesting the equality of your amendment with COINTELPRO. What I was suggesting in a metaphoric and anecdotal way is that the COINTELPRO of decades ago could be compared to where we are today in the life that we lived then. And as a counsel for the Select Committee on Assassinations, reviewing COINTELPRO, it was as frightening then about intrusion and getting information on civil rights leaders that was not relevant to what the FBI was trying to secure. I was only using that, again, as an anecdotal story to say that we always must put in the parameters around our work. We now live in a different life, terrorism, protecting the cybersecurity, and I think that this simple process, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to work together, but this simple amendment, I think,
yield for
I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
Let me just say that this amendment does provide privacy protections, which was the very concern that you were talking about. This really deals with advancing the Einstein program, which has been implemented since the last administration, is supported by this administration. It hardens the Federal networks, which are attacked every day. Enormous amounts of data are being stolen, primarily from, well, countries I won't mention. But enormous amounts of data have been stolen in the past several years, including from the Pentagon.
Well, reclaiming
and so what this does is harden the networks. Now, let me just say, the gentlelady has offered this amendment at the very last minute.
But you're on my time, so I'm trying to reclaim it.
Well, then I'm going to ask for more time from that.
All right. If you will, then go right ahead.
The gentlelady reclaims the time.
First, let me just say that your amendment leaves out the specific requirement that DHS must certify that any monitoring be only of Federal systems. And second, it does not require specific guidelines. And that's what we're saying, written guidelines to minimize the collection of sensitive and personal information, nor require that information be deleted if upon review it is found to have no relevance to the cybersecurity purpose. I know I don't want to put words in Dr. Brown's mouth, but I know that many people from both sides of the aisle have a privacy concern, no matter what we're doing. And I'm just saying that this is two simple points. It does not take away, Mr. McCaul, from your amendment. I'd ask my colleagues to support the amendment. I thank the gentlelady for yielding to, but I wanted to make sure that it was clear that I was not talking about the private system. And second, I wanted to be clear that I understand the difference between wiretap, having been a lawyer dealing with investigatory matters for the House of Representatives as a young staffer some few years ago, younger than I may be today. Let me yield back to the distinguished Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you for the time. I ask the support of the Jackson-Lee Amendment.
The gentlelady from Texas for the gentlelady from New York yields back. And
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Georgia.
I yield to Mr. McCaul.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia. Let me just read two provisions in this amendment, in my amendment. The content of communications will be collected and retained only when the communication is associated with a known or reasonably suspected cybersecurity threat, and communications and system traffic will not be subject to the operation of a countermeasure unless associated with such threats. And then finally, it says information obtained pursuant to activities authorized under this subsection will only be retained, used, or disclosed to protect Federal systems from cybersecurity threats, mitigate against such threats, or with the approval of the Attorney General for law enforcement purposes when the information is evidence of a crime which has been or is being or about to be committed. I don't know how anybody could be opposed to that language, but let me just say this as a matter of fairness. I object to the gentlelady's amendment. I intend to offer this amendment. Given the timing of the gentlelady's amendment, I would like to offer to work with her in terms of if there's some way we can come to some sort of agreement or compromise before this bill goes to the floor. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
And I yield back.
Mr. Brown.
The gentleman from Georgia yields back. Is there any further discussion on the Jackson-Lee amendment to the amendment? Okay, if there is no further discussion, the question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by Ms. Jackson-Lee of Texas. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no.
No.
No. In the opinion of the Chair, the noes have it, and the amendment to the amendment is not agreed to. Now proceed with discussion on the McCaul amendment. Is there any further discussion on agreeing to the amendment offered by Mr. McCaul? If there is not, the question is on agreeing to the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to.